I'm a compulsive eater and bulimic, and I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from the gray sheet, write them down, commit them to a sponsor, and I don't eat in between no matter what. Abstinence is the most important thing in my life today, and by the grace of God and this program, I have been abstinent for 9 years, back to back on the gray sheet. My story starts in childhood, like many of us. I was probably, if I wasn't born a compulsive eater, I became one pretty quickly. By the time I was 3 or 4 years old, I remember food being the most important thing about any place we went, anything we did. There wasn't anything else that I really was able to attach to. I didn't really learn to bond with people very well. I didn't learn to be part of things. I learned to isolate with food and to treat, kind of deal with my anxiety by eating. I wasn't a particularly fat kid, but I think I was chubbier than was average when I was growing up. I felt fat. My parents worried about me being fat. My mother was somewhat overweight. She wasn't morbidly obese yet, but she was a little overweight, and in the 1970s, that wasn't something people overlooked. It was something people noticed a lot. And I really think my mom just wanted me to be happy. I don't think she had any sort of context for the idea that telling me I was fat wasn't great for my mental health. And she had me in dance classes and sort of a lot of typical things that little girls like to do, and stereotypical perhaps. But I did love dancing, and I went to ballet class, and I don't know if I was any good at it or not, because I was always going to be too fat to be a ballerina, so what was the point? Going into teenagehood, it was the 1980s, and that was a time when eating disorders were on everyone's radar, and I wouldn't have had a clue what that was, except that it was all over television and everything else. And my first thought wasn't, oh, how sad for those people. My first thought was, gosh, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to be that controlled about my eating? Wouldn't it be nice to just be able to throw up after a meal and still be able to eat what I wanted? To me, it seemed like the perfect solution. And I tried, starting around age 14, I tried bulimic behavior, and I couldn't really get the hang of it, which in retrospect I see as God's grace. But by the time I was about 17, I did have the hang of it. And my weight yo-yoed throughout my teen years. I would go down to a normal weight, never really underweight, but I would go down to basically a normal weight, and then I would bounce back up higher. And then after a while, I'd go back down to a normal-ish weight, and then I would bounce back higher. So from about age 17 until I was pregnant with my son at 25, I was playing the yo-yo game, and I was taking over-the-counter medications that were not intended to be appetite suppressants, but were very, very effective appetite suppressants. So I was basically abusing over-the-counter medications to control my appetite as well. And then I would, there were a couple of things that were herbal supplements that worked too, and it was striking. They really did work. But of course, eventually I would rebound from that. The bulimic behavior didn't make me skinny. It, I guess, kept me from getting fatter. And the only time I was successfully free of the purging behavior was when I was pregnant with my son. But I gained, as a result, I went from 180 pounds to 260 in the course of my pregnancy. Some of that came off right with the birth, but most of it was real weight that I had gained in an effort to not abuse my child pre-birth by throwing up and messing up my electrolytes. The bulimic behavior didn't kick back in right away. Well, it did kick in pretty quickly. What happened for me was I had a lovely, and I'm not a natural mom. I'm just not a natural mom. I don't love being a mom. I admire people who do. I wish I was, but it's not natural for me. It's a lot of work. And the only time that it was natural for me was the first year of his life when I was breastfeeding, and the hormones were it was like the most peaceful and calm I'd ever been in my life. But I stopped breastfeeding when he was 1 because I wanted to go back on appetite suppressants because I didn't want to be fat. And many people stop breastfeeding at 1. There's nothing wrong with that, but I wouldn't have if it hadn't have been for this disease, and I would have bonded to my 2- and 3-year-old better and differently than I did. And I guess part of me believes that has colored my relationship with him all along. It wasn't child abuse by any stretch of the imagination. I just know that it wasn't what God would have wanted me to do, what my higher power or my son's higher power would have wanted for us. And I was a great mom that first year, and I became abusive after that. And I don't know if it was that I was basically ingesting mild stimulants every day, or just the obsessive nature of the disease, or just the ism of that doesn't allow me to connect connect to other people's needs in a healthy way. But I don't do that anymore, and that's been one of the reliefs of this program. It took a couple of years into working the 12 steps before I was able to completely release the hitting and the screaming. The hitting I was able to release first, and the screaming I was able to release later. And I'm not at all proud of that part of my life, but I share it because I know that I'm not alone. I know that there are other people who have struggled with that behavior, not wanting to be that way, and knowing that something was desperately wrong, but not having any other solution. So one of the reasons Gray Sheet stuck for me right away is because I had, quote, relapsed, unquote, in other programs. And I had done one of the strict low carbohydrate plans for a couple of years, and it was the only time that I had been free of purging behavior without struggle. After the pregnancy, it was really kind of miraculous, and I had slipped and slid on that plan a couple of times before it stuck. And it was one bite of sugar, one bite of junk food, Halloween stuff, work celebration stuff. And it took one bite, and I was down the rabbit hole, literally. And that taught me, prior to even starting the low carbohydrate diet, taught me that my body has an addiction to sugars and grains. And that was really important for me to believe and understand completely in order to get this program, to really get that this was a chemical reaction, that it wasn't, that it was the same as alcoholism, that it was the same as heroin addiction. It's a chemical reaction that happens in my body and brain that makes me unable to stop, even when I don't want the food, even when I really, actually, really, really, really don't want to be eating, and I can't stop. And that's not... There's nothing conscious going on there. That's a chemical reaction. So what happened for me with that low carbohydrate plan was that I slipped and slid. And after a couple of years of doing it strictly, and then sort of doing it with all these specialty foods that really weren't that low carb, there was a potluck at work one night, and I don't know why that night was any different from any other. It wasn't, but the next thing I knew, I was getting off a midnight shift, stopping at a fast food restaurant, and binging in my car in a back alley and puking out the door of my car. And that might be graphic, but that's the nature of this disease. That's where one bite takes me, and it doesn't take me there tomorrow. It doesn't take me there next week or next year. It takes me there right now, like within a few hours. That's what I'm doing. It's humbling, and yet thank you, God, for the really, really clear message. And I spent a good 9 months slipping and sliding to get back on the low carbohydrate plan. And in the process of that, I came across somebody on the internet in one of the support groups who was a gray sheeter. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I'll just do this diet one more time. And if that doesn't work, maybe I'll do gray sheet. And, of course it didn't. And my bottom was my husband walking in on me purging. And the reason that was a shift for me was because normally, even today, my response to that would be to feel like just abject humiliation, like just the most disgusting, worm of the earth, which is a very self-centered way to respond to something like that. Instead, in that moment, literally my higher power came down and graced me with a full understanding. It was as if it was injected into my brain, a full understanding of how much pain I was causing him instead of how much pain it caused me. Because when all I think about is the pain it causes me, well, I'm only hurting myself, right? Except that I'm not. And people actually love me. Sometimes I'm not sure I get why, but they do. And they don't deserve to be repaid with me abusing myself. It's obvious that they don't deserve to be repaid with me abusing them, but they also don't deserve to be repaid with me abusing me. And the fact that I was able to see that in that desperate moment is nothing but the grace of God. I was given that sort of light bulb. And I think we all are lucky enough to get those light bulbs. It's what we do with them that matters. And got on the computer, figured out the phone bridge line, contacted just anybody. I was so desperate, and that's what they mean when they say the gift of desperation. I was so desperate, I didn't care who I asked. I didn't care what I did. In fact, once I knew what the gray sheet sort of kind of was, I ate a couple of meals to the best of my ability that, now I know wouldn't have been gray sheet meals, but I weighed and measured food for 2 or 3 meals before I was able to get a sponsor. That doesn't count for abstinence, but who cares? What it counts for is that desperation, and that absolutely I was as surrendered as I ever had been anyway. Surrender, I guess, I think happens in layers, but I was as surrendered as I'd ever been, and so done with the roller coaster, the hamster wheel. So abstinence, the most important thing for me about abstinence, the thing that makes abstinence stick for me, is that I love my food. And it's more than just liking the way it tastes. What's really important for me is that my food is safe. We talk about having a beginning, a middle, and an end to each meal. And I don't have to be questioning every bite I take of that meal. I know it's weighed and measured. It's all sitting in front of me at once. I don't start on one part of my meal until I have it all ready to go. And there's no stress in it. It's done. It's in a bowl or a couple of bowls, and it's mine. And there's no debate. There's no worries. There's nothing there. And I'll tell you something. I'm up in weight on Gray Sheet. I don't like it. I really don't like it. But I'm not counting calories. I'm not obsessing on it. My food is still mine, and it's still safe. And I am able to be like almost a normal person, saying, I'm still making choices to eat heavier, so I'm going to be at this weight. And if I don't want to make choices to eat lighter, then I need to go buy some new clothes. I'm not going to lie. I'm a compulsive eater. There's always going to be that part in the back of my head that's like grossed out when I gain a pound. But if you want to compare this to even the first couple of years in Gray Sheet, where I was still subconsciously, ruminatively counting calories all the time, it's miraculous. It's miraculous that I can be 10 pounds above goal weight and still function and not see it as a character defect. It's calories in, calories out, and I like to eat my heavy Gray Sheet food, and that's the trade-off. It's just a trade-off. It's just a decision. I can exercise more. I can eat lighter on the Gray Sheet. I choose not to do that right now, and so the consequence is I'm a size 10 and not a size 6. It's not the end of the world. If that's going to change, it'll change. I also am sort of aware that my higher power has other things that he wants me to be focusing on. My higher power would probably like me to exercise more, but that's about it. My higher power doesn't care if I'm skinnier. That's not what's important. Health is important, though, and so exercise is something that I feel like I'm not exactly following my higher power's will in right now. Abstinence is a bed of roses, but roses have thorns. And what it is what changed for me in abstinence was not that life got perfect, but that I realized that I have big girl panties in my drawer and I can put them on and get out there in the world and do the next right thing, even when I don't want to. And I can see when I'm slipping into isolation, and I can ask whether that's just where I need to be right now or whether I need to suit up and show up for something even if I don't want to. And I get that guidance from a higher power. A lot of tools of program help me. I'm not great about doing them every day, and it's sort of like when I do them, they work, and when I don't do them, they don't work. That's just the long and short of it. I believe in service. I also believe in balance. I do work a job that requires daily service to people who are addicts and alcoholics, but that doesn't take the place of program service, because in my job, I can't be the addict next door. I have to be that professional. So I have to also do service in a capacity where I'm just one of the herd, where I'm just another bozo on the bus, an addict among addicts. So my work drains me and saps me, which means I'm not going to spend 24/7 doing program service, but I am going to do program service because I need to do it in a context where I can admit what the realities are for me. Things that I've been through in abstinence, a complete redo of the main area of our house, including the kitchen. No stove, no fridge, no nothing. That was early on. That was about 9 months in abstinence. 5 months into abstinence, I took a 3.5 week driving vacation through California with my mother-in-law. That was, you want to talk about humility and practicing boundaries. And I was abstinent the whole time because I was on the phone the whole time. I didn't own a cell phone until we left for that trip. I bought a cell phone because it was how I was going to stay gray sheet abstinent for that trip. And having a supportive spouse made a big difference too. You know, that moment of humiliation where he walked in on me was a gift in another way too, because he also saw the nature of this disease just plain and flat out. And so he didn't give me a hard time about the fact that we weren't going to be eating together anymore, and that I needed to do this for my health. And how lucky I am that he loves me enough to be there for me through that process. What else have I been through in abstinence? I completed a master's degree in abstinence. I went from working 1 day a week my first 2 years to my husband being laid off and being thrust into full-time work, which was very intimidating at the time. I didn't know how I was going to stay abstinent, but I did, you know, and I didn't know how I was going to navigate a workplace telling people why I didn't eat lunch with them. It was mind-boggling at first, but I really made it the priority. I love the saying that when we're confronted with a dilemma in life, we choose the option that's going to keep us abstinent. We can base a lot of our decisions on that. I mean, like, for instance, I can base a decision of what job I'm going to take based on whether it's going to pay for my abstinent food, whether I'm assured I'm going to get a lunch hour, whether the stress is going to be so much that I'm in danger of relapsing. Those can be decisions it can help me with everything in my life. And I guess I'm lucky to know without a doubt that my higher power wants me to stay abstinent. It wants me to die abstinently. And I'm good with that. People ask me, are you going to do this forever? And my answer to that is, I sure hope so. Because I really do. I don't want to live or eat any other way. This is on my worst days, my hardest days, my days when I'm just tired of everything and everyone, I still have my safe, clean, abstinent food. I still know that my body is taken care of, and that I don't have to take my anger out on me in order to, you know, I guess if I come to it, I get mad at myself for expressing my anger to others. But frankly, that's the challenge, I think, you know, psychologically in bulimia, is we're either going to express our feelings, find a way to express our feelings in the world, or we're going to take them out on ourselves. Purging is a very, very violent act to the body, as anybody who's ever done it or tried to do it knows. And there was a chemical payoff for that, the endorphin rush. Yeah, it was intense. It was intense. So I'm here today and I'm abstinent. And what an amazing thing to have reached a 9-year milestone and still be here and have it just be how I live today, and have there not really be any question about whether I will be abstinent. Sometimes there might be a question about how I'll be abstinent, and that's pretty much it. And I do whatever it takes today to stay abstinent. That means dealing with my crazy. And that's what the 12 steps are for. The 12 steps keep me abstinent because they teach me how to deal with my crazy. Everything from my perfectionism to my frustration with the way people are, which is often normal, but I'm not good at handling it. And what else do I want to say? No matter what, you know, no matter what. And with that, I'll pass.